Ronald the Rules Lawyer. Pathfinder 2nd edition has these cool things called rituals, which were spells in previous editions of D&D and Pathfinder, but the designers here decided that since these have more effect on the story, they should require more time, have some significant cost, and be more difficult to do. Things like Consecrate, Resurrect, Binding Circle, and Wish. They're magical in the world, but you don't need to be a spellcaster to do them, which is a carryover from D&D 4th edition. Here you just need the required skills to do them. But something happened in one of my campaigns recently that made me think that Pathfinder rituals could be too damn hard. I was running a Paizo adventure path that required the characters to complete a ritual before they could progress. And it was very hard. It took 5 attempts before they succeeded. And for the level that they were at, if I had run it rules as written and charged them the full ritual cost for each attempt, then the cost would have been the full treasure value of everything owned by one of the player characters. And so for today's video, I do the math and try to figure out whether Pathfinder rituals are too damn hard. And while we're at it, how viable is it to use the ritual to create undead to have undead minions in this game? First, let me introduce myself. I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. Support my Patreon. I don't make money as an attorney. For an explanation as to why, look at the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. Rituals in Pathfinder are harder than their level would suggest, and they're actually called ranks in this system, comparable to spell levels in D&D and earlier versions of Pathfinder. These seem to violate all the rules for how you design a challenge at a particular level in this system. I'm going to list some things that were red flags for me, and let's use this ritual, Consecrate, as an example. This is the one that lets you consecrate an area to make worshippers of your deity gain an advantage in combat, and those anathema to your deity have disadvantages. It takes a long time to cast, a total of 3 days, and it costs 20 gold per spell rank. In this case, at the minimum rank, it costs 40 gold pieces to attempt it. Like all rituals, requires one primary caster who does a primary skill check, in this case religion, and a number of secondary casters. Here, at least 2 who must do the crafting and performance skill checks. The secondary casters do their checks first, and they add bonuses or penalties to the primary roll, which happens last. We're eventually going to math out how likely a level 3 party will succeed at this ritual, but first I'm going to point out those red flags. First, the DCs, the number you need to meet, are harder than you would expect for this level. Here are the charts for determining DCs in the system. At level 3, you have access to this 2nd rank ritual. And the standard DC for a level 3 challenge is 18 in the system. Meanwhile, down here are the DCs that correlate with spells of certain ranks. So the DC to identify a 2nd rank spell would be 18, which corresponds to a 3rd level creature. They're both 18. Level 3 is when you get access normally to 2nd rank spells. This makes sense. However, rituals go by their own rules. You're supposed to take the spell rank and double it, and that determines the level of the challenge. So here, the DC is actually going to be 19. But that's the DC for the secondary skill checks only. The primary caster has to do what in Pathfinder is called a very hard check for this level. That means adding 5 to the number. The primary caster needs to do a DC 24 skill check, which, if we look at this chart, is equivalent to a level 8 challenge, and it's a level 3 character. Okay, so maybe that's what the secondary casters are for. They're supposed to assist the primary caster and make that very hard check easier, and this is me using the game's terminology, calling it very hard. But secondary casters are more likely to harm than help the primary check with a ritual. When they do their secondary checks, here are the degrees of success and what happens at each of them. A critical success gives a +2 circumstance bonus to the primary check. Success has no effect. Failure gives a -4 circumstance penalty to the primary check, so double what critical success gives. And critical failure as failure, so -4, and you reduce the degree of success of the primary skill check by 1 step. So that's effectively a -14 to the primary check. Here are the numbers on the right, and note how the harms outweigh the benefits. And even if every secondary caster succeeds, they contribute nothing. They don't help the primary caster with the very hard check. Also, it specifies that your group needs to cover every skill listed under the secondary checks. So here it lists crafting and performance, making it quite likely you'll have a failure or even a critical failure. By the way, for my group that failed 4 times before succeeding, we didn't notice this rule. We had different secondary casters attempt the same skill. It should have been harder for us. This all gets even harder given the fact that it's a downtime activity and you cannot use hero points to improve your chances of success. This is the language. It says that, as with other downtime activities, fortune and misfortune effects can't modify your checks for the ritual. The logic being, okay, here is language from GM Core, is that downtime activities represent the culmination of a series of tasks over a long period. Which, by the way, I didn't know was the rule. I had been allowing hero points on downtime activities before. But yeah, this is the logic. It's because it represents many checks over a long period. And then we have the kicker that if you fail your check, you don't get your money back. It says in the rules for rituals that the cost is consumed when you attempt the primary skill check. Contrast this to the crafting activity, which when you critically fail on crafting, you ruin just 10% of the raw materials you supplied. And you had to supply half of the cost in raw materials at the start of the craft activity. So this is just a loss of 5% if you critically fail, which reflects the designer's thought when writing the crafting rules that they didn't want to punish the party's wealth severely with a failure. And they reserve that behind a critical failure. But for a ritual, if you just regularly fail, fuck you. Oh, but there's the ritualist archetype. That's supposed to make this easier, right? Well, let's take a look. The dedication gives you a +2 circumstance bonus to all checks to perform a ritual. But that sadly does not stack with a +2 circumstance bonus you get from secondary casters. There are some other feats that basically do the job of partially mitigating the harshness of the ritual rules. And the capstone feat, if you will, the level 14 feat called Enterprising Ritualist, all it does is reduce the cost of the ritual by 10%. So let's say this ritualist resurrects a party member, and they actually miscalculate the cost. It's actually 2,800 gold pieces to resurrect. They get a discount of 280 gold. How much is 280 in context? That's about 3% of the expected character wealth of a level 14 character. And rituals don't happen that often in a campaign. It maybe happens once every few levels, in my experience. This feat feels almost like an insult. All right, so let's math out the Consecrate ritual and look at the likelihood of success of a level 3 party attempting this task. We have Kyra the Cleric and 2 other individuals, all worshippers of Sarenrae, as required by the ritual, who want to consecrate a shrine to Sarenrae to protect it from the undead and other evil creatures. Because it's a second rank ritual, here are the DCs, it's the same numbers we saw before. Kyra, her religion bonus would be about +12 at level 3, assuming that she has focused on her religion skill, raised it up to expert, and also made a hefty investment in a shining symbol, which costs 55 gold, about half of her expected wealth at level 3, which gives her a +1 item bonus to religion checks. Let's say her compatriots are also expert in their respective skills, a generous assumption. I'm assuming that their corresponding attributes, intelligence and charisma, are +3. Again, I think very generous. So their bonuses would be +10. In reality, one of these party members is probably only trained in the required skills for this ritual, but I wanted to err towards being generous to see what the numbers are there. Now, this is me showing my work, and probably some mathematician or statistician or smart person out there will maybe find a mistake, but this is what I did. I basically brute forced it and went through every combination of the secondary casters could possibly both critically succeed or both critically fail and everything in between. And then I weighed each possibility given the likelihood it would happen, put in how much they would affect the primary check, found the likelihood of each degree of success for the primary check, and then gave each row its appropriate weight given how likely it would happen. So these are the results. The secondary casters, on average, gave a -3.355 penalty to Kyra's check, despite how relatively good they were, I thought. Remember when I said she was a level 3 character attempting a level 8 check? Well, we can raise that to level 10 now, and that's rounding down. And the spread of the 4 degrees of success is actually what you'd expect somebody with a plus 12 modifier would have when attempting a DC 27 check. Megan, I'm not going to follow you. The ritual has a 4.5% chance of critically succeeding, 26.5% chance of succeeding, and a whopping 42.1% chance of failing, and a 26.8% chance of critically failing. That's a almost 70% chance of failure. And the chance of succeeding in some form is not much higher than the chance of critically failing. And this just feels too low to me, given how all of these people were expert at level 3 and how much they had prepared for this. And if we make the party level 4, the math does not change very much. This is what it looks like then. We go from a 31% chance of success to a 37% chance. Now, maybe I'd be okay with this. You know, rituals are supposed to be hard. Just try again, right? But they had to pay the full cost of the ritual with each attempt. 40 gold a pop in this case. Now, if they were trying to craft a level 3 magic item at this level, the cost of critically failing that would be about 2.5 gold pieces for critically failing. Here, the cost is much higher for regular failing. Here it's 40 gold, and if you're curious, the expected wealth of each character at level 3 is somewhere between level 3 and 4, because they're in the middle, right? Is going to be somewhere between 75 and 140 gold pieces. So we're talking about, for a party of 4, every attempt is costing them about 10% of the entire party's wealth. Now, admittedly, I surveyed the rituals after doing this math, and I noticed that I believe most, maybe a slim majority of the rituals, require only 1 secondary caster or none, which would significantly improve the math because you're removing those chances of applying a minus 14 to the check. Like, for example, if a second rank ritual that did not require any secondary casters at all was attempted by a level 3 party member, then the numbers look like this. It's just a straight check. It's a slightly less than 50% chance for this character who's dedicating herself to this skill and getting pretty much the highest bonus possible. But also, there are many rituals that require 2 or sometimes even 3 secondary casters, like the one that my party struggled with and had to attempt 5 times. Now, what about at the higher levels? Because the way Pathfinder works is if you focus on a skill to make it master and then legendary, you actually outpace the math a bit and feel how legendary you are. So I did the math for a level 15 party attempting to resurrect one of their party members with an 8th rank resurrect ritual, which requires 2 secondary casters also. By the way, there's a raised dead spell in this game which only takes 10 minutes to cast and doesn't require a skill check. But it generally costs more and requires a corpse that hasn't been dead longer than 3 days, and that it always be relatively intact. Well, these are the bonuses I expected for a party of this level, Kyra being legendary in religion, of course, and everyone having +2 item bonuses from items, and the secondary casters who need to do medicine and society checks being either master or legendary, and this is the average number I came up with. Well, the secondary checks have a DC of 35, and the primary check has a DC of 40. We'll see that here at level 15, the numbers are not much better. The average modifier provided by the secondary casters is a minus 2.695, so we're asking Kyra, a level 15 character, to do effectively a DC 43 or a level 21.5 check. There's about a 43% chance of success and a 16.3% chance of critical failure. Meanwhile, it costs 4,500 gold to resurrect a level 15 party member, and their expected wealth at that level, starting at level 15, is 13,500, about 1/3, which sounds about right to me, personally, if you only have to pay the cost once. But this is what you have to pay for every attempt. All right, my second question, how viable is it to create undead minions in this game? Here is the create undead ritual. You can create a minion that you can command in battle, but that requires a critical success on your check, and it must be at least 4 levels lower than you. So assuming a level 5 party, it has to be level 1 or lower. And Those of you who have played enough Pathfinder know that makes it a very weak creature against the foes you're typically encountering at level 5. By the way, it provides that you can have a maximum of 4 minions under your control, but that's kind of pointless because you have to spend one of your actions to command each minion. There's really no point to have more than one. The counter argument is that this lets you have an intelligent undead creature who is either friendly or, if you critically succeed, helpful to you. But by rule, the helpful condition only means that they will agree to reasonable requests that you make to them that don't impact their quality of life. And basically, they're not crazy adventurers. And there's also the cost factor. Our level 1, let's say, skeletal soldier is going to cost 60 gold pieces per attempt. And a level 5 character, extrapolating, looking at the halfway point between level 5 and level 6 on the chart, is going to have about 350 gold in total wealth. And remember that you have to critically succeed on this check to make this undead minion. So, okay, second rank ritual, DC 24. Critical success requires a 34, so a natural 20 by Kyra the Cleric. She has to spend 1/6 of her total wealth on each attempt, which has a 5% chance of creating a minion. Even if she succeeds and doesn't critically succeed, if they're unintelligent, they maraud the local area. You've created a problem. And by rule, when an undead goes down at 0 hit points, it is destroyed. So let's say you go through all the trouble of creating a level 1 skeletal soldier for your level 5 party, and you encounter a higher level spellcaster, let's say this level 7 wizard. So let's say they cast a fireball, which your skeleton has a +7 reflex saved and has to contend with a DC of 25. By my math, that's about a 60% chance that your skeleton will be destroyed outright. Now, I suppose there's a caveat where if you were to do this at higher levels, a minion that's 4 levels lower than you is far less squishy. But is one minion who's 4 levels lower than you, who will not level up with you, who costs 20% of your character wealth per attempt to create, worth it? Does this system let you viably create permanent undead minions? Well, no. Clearly, if you want to be a necromancer in this system, you need to be a necromancer. There's actually a necromancer class in Pathfinder, which gives you temporary undead nuggets that you can command and sacrifice in battle. Megan, don't play with my microphone. That's going to knock my microphone over. No. If you want a permanent undead buddy, you can with the Summoner class, or you can get access to animal companions and, if your GM allows it, allow you to have an undead companion. Otherwise, the main use for the Create Undead ritual, to me, seems to be to create an intelligent undead who is your servant, who is not used in battle. Alright, so what do we think about this? Are rituals too damn hard? And would I house rule them? Well, first, they're not necessarily too hard for every table. I can see the design intent here. The clear intent is to make them harder than other tasks of their rank or level. You want to make these significant events. These often have permanent effects and affect the story, and you want them to be memorable and harder to achieve with some cost. However, in my subjective opinion, I feel they are harder than I would like. The rules say that the GM can adjust the DCs of rituals and make other changes, but we're not playing D&D here. We don't expect the GM to fix what might be bad rules. I think it's fair to say that the baseline here does not meet what people would expect. How difficult you expect something to be based on its level or rank simply isn't true here. The success rate of doing a ritual, or rather failure rate, is akin to something about 6 or 7 levels higher than the party. Now, for those tables who want to make them less very hard, what would I suggest? And I have some house rules to propose. First, think about what it is about rituals you want to mitigate for your table. They already cost time and potentially a lot of money as well if the party fails repeatedly. On the time issue, consider how important time is in your campaign. As a GM, think about, will there actually be consequences for lost time? If there already will be, then these rules are probably too punishing. And even if losing time has little consequences in your campaign, you might still find them too punishing on the party's wealth because of how costly they are. So there are 3 things I would propose under Ronald's rules of rituals. First, instead of a very hard DC, 5 above the standard DC for a level, just get the hard DC, which is only 2 above. Next, what if failing a secondary check were less punishing? A regular failure gives only a -2 circumstance penalty, and a critical failure gives a -4. Now, how would this affect the math? Here I changed the effect that the degrees of success of the secondary checks would have on the primary check, and these are the numbers. So for our original example, a level 3 party trying to do a second rank consecrate ritual, the average modifier for the secondary casters goes from -3.355 to -1.095. And this is how the odds changed. They are significantly improved, yet still you are more likely to fail than to succeed. You have a 40% chance of success, and still a 16% chance to critically fail. As for how combining these two house rules will affect the math, this is how they will affect the numbers. Oh, and I should move my head to the side. This is what the numbers look like now. It's somewhat better than 50-50. There's now a 54.5% chance of success. That includes about an 8% chance to critically succeed with a 6% chance to critically fail. Now, given that this group is pretty optimally built for this ritual, this feels about right to me. However, as you get to higher levels, then on-level tasks tend to get easier as your party becomes master and legendary at skills. And also, there are some rituals that don't require secondary checks. So if we take a level 15 character with a +30 skill modifier, doing an 8th rank ritual that requires no secondary casters, if we've lowered the DC from very hard to hard, the DC is now 37 instead of 40, which means that the likelihood of succeeding on this ritual has significantly improved to 20% critical success and 50% success. And these numbers will swing another 15% upward when they get to level 20 and can improve their stats in other ways. So this actually feels like too much of an improvement to me when you get to those rituals that don't require secondary casters. So this is what I'm experimenting with. These are the current versions of Ronald's Rules of Rituals for now. I simply make the secondary checks less punishing on a failure, and I leave the DC alone. But I also counter the cost of repeated attempts by making the party have to pay 10% of the cost of the ritual if they fail. Which to me reflects the design intent with the crafting activity. Failure shouldn't be so punishing to the party's wealth so as to make it prohibitive. Now, if time is not a big factor in a campaign, a GM could increase this cost of failure to make it still feel significant. Now, how would I change creating undead and other rituals that give you minions? There's animate object as well. Well, first I'll acknowledge that the designers have a legitimate concern to not want to empower players to have a bunch of minions to crowd the battlefield. It complicates battles, and it means that player is hogging more time than other people. However, I thought they would go the route of simply preventing it from being cheese so that it presented an interesting choice, a trade-off. But the rules as written basically pound the idea of having minions into oblivion. First of all, having to pay the full cost for each attempt is prohibitive, and I would do my 10% of the cost rule. I'd allow you to make your minion on a regular success, and minions also seem too costly. You're spending 20 to 25% of your character wealth on something 4 levels lower than you that is weaker than a companion you can get from a feat, which can easily be destroyed. So I think the prices should be lower. Now, how much lower? I don't know. Someone out there who has a better sense of the value of such a minion should probably weigh in. If there are hacks out there or third-party publications that explore this, leave a comment. I'd like to know. Next, how about they aren't destroyed and they are repairable? Perhaps if they go down to 0 hit points, they are out of commission for the day and you have to wait until your next daily preparations before you can use them again. Now, maybe I'm being too hasty buffing create undead and these other rituals that create minions, but has anyone out there created undead minions and found them worthwhile using these rules as written? I don't know. If there is, I'd like to hear that story. So that concludes my video for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and also subscribe to my channel, and also support my Patreon, which gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content, and also join my Discord server. I hang out there a lot. There are over 6,000 of us. We talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming, and if you want to play Pathfinder, you can join our drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time.